So today is 29 January 2026, and we are recording an oral history interview about two projects that you've done with border crossings. One of them is No Woman's Land, and the other one Remembrances. But to begin, I would like you to please say me about your name and also about your background and about yourself a bit.
Okay. So my name is Avatâra Ayuso. I'm a choreographer. I'm originally from Spain, and I've been based in the UK for about almost 20 years. No, 20 years already, yes. And I have an independent dance company based here in the UK, and I use that infrastructure to collaborate with people from many different countries and cultures around the world. I trained as a dancer, ballet dancer, contemporary dancer. I also did a lot of tango. So those are kind of the techniques that influence my work. And I also direct a charity for women and girls. It's called AVA Dance, Advancing Women's Aspirations with Dance. And we are dedicated to the leadership development of women and girls through dance. So those are kind of the two infrastructures, my independent dance company with projects around the world, and then my charity for women and girls based in the UK.
Thank you. Could you please say your experience about the first project you've done with Border Cross, I guess is No Woman's Land in 2018? Yeah, can you please say more about that?
Yes, I that project originally started in 2017. I wanted to create a duet between a Mediterranean woman like me from the island of Majorca and a woman from the Arctic, and an Inuk woman. One starts with those ideas, but I didn't know anyone from the Arctic, any Inuk woman, absolutely no one. So it took me quite a few months, about 9 months, to get in touch with the Inuit community in Canada. During that process, I approached the Canada House in London to tell them my idea, if they could help me connect with someone there in Canada, in the Arctic. And in that process, they told me, you need to meet Michael Wallin. That's the person that you need to meet here in the UK, someone that has a lot of experience in collaborating with Indigenous people. And at that time, I had worked with people in Burkina Faso, in Senegal, but not from the Arctic. And they introduced me to Michael, and that's how I met him. So in the process of researching for No Woman's Land, Michael was very generous with his expertise from the very beginning, his recommendations on how to work and approach Indigenous communities, and some kind of giving a good social political context of the relationships that get established between white Europeans and Indigenous people. So the piece started to develop little by little. I presented the first version in Germany, in Dresden, in the European Center for the Arts. Michael came to see it. Again, we had good talks about what is the next development of this project. In 2019, I believe we presented it in or 19, we presented it in London, part of the Border Crossing Festival. So the learning was incredible on many, many levels, from understanding much more about my own culture, having to research about what it means to be a Mediterranean woman, but also understanding a lot about how the Inuit communities, the struggles and the achievements that they have nowadays in the 21st century. So it was a long process, I would say, as I said, a couple of years. And Michael was always there to support that learning relationship between Naulaq and myself.
Great. You mentioned the political aspect in this work. Can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, I mean, we well, first we have the side of the Europeans, where there is this Eurocentrism, where we believe that we have the solutions and the answers to every problem in the world. And obviously, when you start collaborating with people of other cultures and countries, you kind of carry that in your shoulders, even if it's unconsciously. So with my work and my company, I try to overcome that and learn and understand in which situation other cultures and people are. So the Inuit have been, and of course Michael can talk much more about this, but for hundreds and hundreds of years have been deprived of developing their culture to the level that they should because of the constrictions of the Canadian government on education, on hunting, on their traditional practices. And even though now there is an effort to reconcile and support them for the damage that they've created, the Inuit community it's very angry and hurt. I had to be very, very aware of that social political context I was stepping in, because, as I said, unconsciously on our backs and our shoulders, we can go with some, ideas, for example, and why don't you do this and this and that, like if they hadn't thought of those possible solutions. So it was just learning a lot. So as I said, because it was a 2-year process, it allowed me to interact with a lot of artists from the Inuit community, to read a lot about the social situation in Canada with them, and how, when they go to the big cities, they are the ones that suffer the most from alcoholism, drugs, from social support as well. Some of the stories of the Inuit, that they had family members that had been killed as well. So, the good thing about the project is that because it was long, 2 years, it could be longer a project, but I really had time to understand a little bit where they were and how my position as a European Mediterranean woman could sit together with theirs.
The burden on the shoulder, that was the things you mentioned, and I'm curious to know how that can also relate it to the feminism and that aspect you brought to this work.
Well, it's like those biases that we carry, and our cultures. Obviously, they have some prejudices and approach also to the world that we live in. I was lucky enough to, thanks to my parents, to from a very, very young age to travel around the world and learn from many other cultures. So very early on, I saw, we traveled especially to Latin America and different countries in Africa. So that allowed me to see how other people were living, and that they were responding to their realities in a very different way from ours. But I also learned from initiatives that happen from Europeans into, for example, countries of Africa, that they didn't work just because they didn't ask the right questions to the locals. So, for example, I can tell you an example. I remember with my parents, we went to Mali, in Africa, and there was this massive, well, kind of village, but massive village built out of metal houses, very small metal houses, and it was completely empty. So when we asked the locals in the village nearby, we said, like, what was that? It looks like a ghost village. And they said, well, that was a European project where they came and built, because they knew that we didn't have, our houses were deteriorating because of the rains, etc. So they built those metal houses with 5 walls, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the ceiling, but they didn't realize that the temperatures here are 45 degrees or more, so inside there is like an oven. You can literally not be inside, and whenever it rains, the noise in the metal is so strong that it's impossible to be inside. So we couldn't use those resources, and they never asked us what is it that we need. So from those experiences with my parents, I realized that you might have ideas, but the first step is connecting with them, understanding their reality, their needs. And most of the times they have the solutions. They might not have the right resources or the financial support to do it. So again, with any collaboration, any creative collaboration, I'm hoping that this is my approach as well, like I'm an artist, you're an artist in your country. How do you work? What do you need? What do I need as well, And for example, talking about feminism, how my work can support other women and other girls that I meet around the world, because there is a lot of talent out there. And most of the times you find that women don't get the same opportunities as men might do. So I use my work as well to say, okay, this is the privilege that I've got. How can I help you in your context with my knowledge and my expertise? And of course, there is a lot of learning back from, learning from them and what they do, what they have achieved. So it's a constant learning process whenever you interact with other cultures. Is a feedback process, culturally feedback process that happens constantly, 24 hours a day.
Great. And you mentioned that a trip to the going to that ghost. You said ghost area, but I also I'm wondering, can you say how did you feel when you see those houses and those area? How was it for you?
You mean in Mali?
Yeah.
Well, no, at the beginning, but it's just questions. At the beginning, you are like, oh, yeah, such a great idea. Then you start getting closer and you're like, okay, there is an issue here because no one is living here. So questions start to emerge. And then the next step is actually being open enough to go and ask the locals. Because many times you might go and see the realities in other countries and then you just stay comfortable with your questions and your wondering. But my parents always taught me about that. Give the next step, talk to them, understand what's going on here, live with them and see in the way they live, many times it's just staying in their homes. So it's kind of questions, wondering, and as I said, then in my case is the next step of asking and understanding, and then reflection on our practices. As I said, then it makes you realize that sometimes we talk about collaboration or international cooperation in the political context, and many times we get it wrong because we go with our assumptions that because the north, we have the money, we believe that that gives us the right to have the answers. But it's not the case always. Most of the time it's not the case. Every country, every culture know what they need and the resources they need. They do know better than anyone external.
I see. Um, Thank you. And now, if I want to maybe go through a bit of more the collaboration part, and can you please say more experience? What was your experience during the collaboration with the other dancer and the community?
Yeah, I mean, with no Woman's Land, it was a project with Naulaq that at that time she was 56, 57 years old. She's not a performing artist on stage. She does traditional Inuit art and traditional Inuit drums. So it was a process for her to, learn how to be on stage, how to repeat the movements in a way that the dramaturgy could flow. But at the same time, on my side, I had to learn that she's not a professional stage performer as I am. So I have to be open to flexibility. So she might change the script. She actually sometimes changes the script. She actually sometimes changed her pattern on the stage, even though we had practice. You need to go from here to there. So it taught me to be much more aware of or adapt to other artistic practices. And respect that as well, There were things that some ideas that I had that she didn't consider right. So as any collaborations, you need to kind of discuss that and why it's important to me, why it's important to her. She spoke English, so in that specific collaboration, I've done other projects in other cultures where language was a barrier, not the body because we were performers, but in this case, she spoke English. And there is a lot of work on getting to know each other. So before creating the actual artistic work was, okay, who are you? Who am I? What was your past? What do you wish for yourself in the present? Getting to know her family. She got to know my family in London it was not there, but anyway, my context. So there is a lot of process of understanding more about who we are and our ways of living. When I got to Nunavut, to the Arctic, I spent there a couple of weeks. That was another layer and a very important part of the creative process. When I arrived there, I remember as I went down the plane with Naulaq is she's Inuit, and the family that picked us up, they looked at me up and down and they said, you are white. Since then, they started to call me the white. And I thought that was a good, as we say, cold shower to say, yes, I'm the white. And that means that I carry all the colonizing history behind my shoulders. And that's how they're going to see me. And now I need to do a lot of work for them to open the doors to me. So those 2 weeks, I had to prove that I had good intentions, that I was going to respect them, that I was going to pay them for their knowledge, that I was not going to use any knowledge in terms of music, storytelling, that they would not allow me. So, and I remember this moment almost at the end of those 2 weeks when finally they thought that I deserved to connect with them and work in that collaboration with Naulaq, where they invited me to a birthday party and they all were eating some of the animals that they hunted, like seal, polar bear, Arctic shark. And normally they don't like doing that with white people unless they feel that you're going to respect their way of eating. Obviously, it's just with the hands, they cut it there. And that was a moment where I said, okay, now I can collaborate with them. Now I have the right to collaborate with them because they've opened the doors to me. Until then, it was quite precarious. I was like, am I going to be able to do this? Because if they don't want to share their knowledge, then out of respect, I wouldn't have done the piece, the work they did.
The points you mentioned in collaboration, different layer, how to connect with people, and then also you talk about the stage. They're really interesting to go through more. And I would like to make a chance now for going to talk about the remembrances and maybe develop more about this. But I would like you, if you want to add anything else about the No Woman Lands for now, tell it now, and then we go for that piece.
No, basically it was a project of a lot of learning. I'm really happy that it took those 2.5 years to develop, and also very grateful to Michael Walling and Border Crossing for trusting me in that journey and helping me, even though it was a little bit outside, not as remembrances, we're going to talk about that one, a little bit more like outside supervising the general context. He was very generous and saw a potential for it to be shared with UK audiences. And that's what you need, a programmer that identifies this is worth sharing. And Michael did. So I'm really grateful to him.
The collaboration, thank you. Collaboration and a stage, I think, is also can be another point in remembrances. As basically you are going through different medium for the stage, being in the park for your performance. So can you please tell me more experience about these two aspects in remembrances?
So Remembrances was a project where we collaborated with First Nation Indigenous artists from Canada as well. And so then Michael and I was as a choreographer, Michael as a dramaturg, we had an Indigenous Canadian poet, we had a British composer, and obviously the Indigenous people from Canada. There were two artists. And the process was a bit different. It was not as long as No Woman's Land. We started to work online in the distance, having a lot of meetings. The premiere was in 2022, so somehow we started at the end of 21, I believe. So there was a lot of conversations on Zoom on, what are we interested in? What do we want to bring in this relationship? And because it was a commission from the Commonwealth Games that were happening in Birmingham at that time, our reflection, Michael's and I, were, okay, how are we going to welcome the Indigenous people from those Commonwealth country into the UK? And how does that make us feel as, British people or Spanish people, as those colonizers that at some point they damaged them? How are they gonna feel being welcome here, and can we welcome them in a way that is respectful? So the process, as I said, was a bit shorter, but there were a lot of conversations about that. And actually, just I think 1 week, 10 days before the premiere, we came together. They came from Canada, and we at that time had been working with dancers here in the UK. That was a very intimate process where we were most of the time, the three dancers, Michael and myself, in the studio. And I know that the questions that we raised about our cultures, some of the dancers had dual heritage as well, how you connect with your culture, what is it that you respect from your culture, what is it that makes you, that is painful about what your country, your culture did. So there were a lot of conversations with the dancers that I know made them reflect very deeply about who they were. So we came together, and we knew that the performance was going to be in a park, not in a traditional black box theater. And obviously that brings a lot of challenges. And in fact, we confronted one of the biggest challenges in the UK, which is rain. And it actually happened. So that was a stage that was much bigger, in the sense that the surface where we were performing was about more than 100 square meters. And in this case, so we had the same questions, but the Indigenous artists had their response, and us in Britain had our response, and we kind of were sharing stage and allowing things to evolve us in a much more open way, and depending on what the performance needed. So it was not as on our side; it was quite a structure. On their side, they flowed a little bit more as well around the performing stage. So yeah, I mean, when you do any work outdoor, it has a lot of challenges, as you can imagine. But at the same time, we wanted to be connected with nature. That was very, very important to us. Indigenous people have a very strong knowledge and connection with anything that is in their nature. So bringing it to a black box in this occasion was not what we were interested in. We wanted to make sure that we felt the earth, that we felt the leaves, the smell, the weather conditions, and from the point of view of European British people, give us the opportunity to interact with those elements when normally we are quite disconnected from that. Yeah, you can go for a walk, but we just wanted to be there in the middle of it. So yeah, a much shorter project, but with Michael, that's when I really worked with him as a dramaturg, and the learnings were incredible. We worked together very, very well. I hope we can work again together in the future, because he has a knowledge of Indigenous people, and the questions to raise, and any political social context that was really informing my approach to movement and choreography, and translated that with the dancers into movement and a physicality. So I think we made a very, very good team.
You mentioned about the rain on the performance day. How did you feel when the rain started?
No, you adapt. I mean, there is a moment that if it's unmanageable, you have to stop. At that time, I was not dancer; I was being the choreographer. But the dancers continued despite the rain, and there is something quite raw about the experience, as I said, of performing in nature and outdoors. You know, you need to become a match. Your senses have to be very open, and the way you dance you have to be more careful, but at the same time grip better in the floor, in the people that you are dancing with. You need to be very, very aware, because you know, in a normal dry condition, you take someone to do something, is quite safe, but in that context anything can go off and you can fall. So then suddenly your senses become much more powerful, and that was the case as well there. You know, with the rain, everything was wet, so their grips had to become stronger, and as I said, it became a little bit, in a good way, raw, and the strength of those bodies, in this case 3 women, was outstanding. It was very beautiful to see them managing the elements.
Interesting. And then the identity you mentioned about you were discovering why you were doing it as a like a basically practicing in the studio and the conversation online. So how did you make the connection uh, between those like exploration in a black box or a studio, and then in the performance on the park? How was the journey of the connection between these two experiences? As you mentioned, also you didn't have that much time before you meet them. So, can you please like explain more about those journey?
I mean, because we knew we were going to perform in a park on every single time. So one of the things that we were very conscious, that the audience could be around 360. So that means that when you create in the studio, I had to move all the time, and Michael as well. We had to position ourselves in different points because audience could be anywhere. So then that means that the movement needs to be quite three-dimensional, or three-dimensional, sorry. And also for the dancers more challenging, because it's not that I turn around, I can relax and breathe. You know, I mean, you can breathe, but be aware that someone might be watching you at that specific moment. So performing wise is quite exhausting to know that audience can be all around. But in the studio itself, we were very aware of that. So we were practicing, and that's what professional artists we do, right? And performing artists, we practice to then get ready. Obviously the rain, that's something that we couldn't practice with. But this approach to a 360 performing space, and yeah, so it was part of the process. And then there was a lot of conversation. Sometimes it was more dancing, sometimes it was like those reflections we had with Michael among ourselves. Some of the dancers were white British, you know, from long generations. Other ones were with African and Caribbean descent. Others were from Spain. So that meant that there was a beautiful, culturally diverse team that could share experiences and thoughts on different subjects, and that was very enriching for everyone. That was very, very enriching. And of course, we had a poet from Canada, an indigenous poet, and his text helped us to establish the basis of some of the questions that we were asking to create movement, and then the music as well, that created a wonderful atmosphere in that process. So everything was kind of being created at the same time while we were in the studio, but everyone knowing that the actual performing space was going to be the park. And we actually went a couple of times to rehearse outdoors before the premiere.
Do you think any improvisation has happened during the performance?
Not on our side. I believe that maybe for the indigenous artists, yes. On our side, it was quite technically complex, the movement. So more than being improvisation, which there was none, it was this awareness of where is the environment we are in and how you need to open your senses to react to it. The indigenous artists, probably they allowed themselves to improvise. It was only 2 of them. And they have a different process of working. More than setting up things, is questions and see how that feels depending on the audience that is there, the weather conditions, how I feel today. So I think they allow themselves to improvise within a framework as well.
Can you please also say a bit more about the stage decoration or any objects that you use for the stage?
Nothing. We didn't use any. It was the stage decoration was the trees, the plants that were around. It was kind of like a hill, like a mini valley where we were performing. They used a flag in their performance that had a kind of a little bit more like a political context. And the only external prop that we used, let's say, was quite a very beautiful moment at the end where we had like a metal can where we did a fire. It was a metal can, a big one, where we did a fire, and we gave which plant did we give? Michael can tell us. It was not rosemary, but to every single people in the audience, maybe it was rosemary. We gave a little branch where they had to celebrate who they were, think about, about people, about their wishes, about what it is to be at home or not being at home, welcoming people. So each of them went around and kind of collaborated into this bonfire that we had permissions and everything. So that was the only external prop that we used to make sure that the audience felt that they were participating in that reflection of that collaboration that we had done in Remembrances.
So participants are kind of collaborating in the performance.
No, they
True.
were not. They were audience members, but at the end, we
And
encouraged them. Just at the end, when we had kind of semi-finished, we guide them to another space, and we gave them this, which is a practice indigenous people kind of are very used to welcoming others in this way and creating a bonfire. So it was in the spirit of respect and collaboration. We encouraged people to be part of that moment at the end of the performance.
getting together.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And how about the music? Can you please tell me a bit more about that?
The music for Remembrances, we worked um, kind of, I mean, Michael knew the composer very well. It was my first collaboration with him, and we worked, which is one of the things that I enjoy the most. He was part of the creative process as we were creating the piece. So even he had some samples of things that he had been creating, and then we were seeing how that would fit into what was being physically developed with me and the dancers. So it was a very flexible relationship, and it was mainly an atmosphere that was created, and then we also had text that was recorded. That was the poem, and that poem it was quite strong in its meaning, and that was part of the soundscape, let's say that we created. And then the indigenous artists from Canada, they had their own music tracks, which we didn't know until almost the very end what it was gonna be. So yeah, they quite surprised us in that process. So there was a lot of surprises that happened, and that always happens when you collaborate with someone in such a short period. Where obviously they make decisions, we made decisions, and so they had their soundscape, and we had our soundscape, and there was a moment where they were merging, going from one to another, and yes, so it was good that it was created. On our case, it was created during our thinking and movement process, rather than just being in post and say like, this is the music we're going to use.
And do you think the text and poem you mentioned also had an effect of basically through the choreography, or is it poem is more connected to the music?
No,
How
the
do you
poem was connected. Sorry, the poem was connected to the concept. And then both the music and the choreography were another layer to express that concept as the poem was. So, all the creative elements in the piece, they were very, very connected to the concept. So it was not a random decision or one dependent on one or another. So yeah.
It's a really collaborative, layered creativity context. That's interesting. And I also would like you to tell us if you are at the moment working on different other projects, or is something coming in future?
I just finished a project. I did a new full-length ballet in Ecuador in an independent company in Guayaquil. It just happened, so I've spent almost 2 months there in Ecuador. And again, it was with local artists, in this case, the ballet dancers. And it's been really, very beautiful as well, because I managed to spend a lot of time with them and understanding their context, what their struggles are in terms, here you go to a theater and most of them have incredible good lighting. You go there to a theater and most of the things are not there, but at the same time I had to put a show on on stage, so I had to adapt, and absolutely everyone did their best to do a wonderful work. So I respect that very, very much. And I had to adapt to the conditions, to the weather, to the working pattern. So any new collaboration brings new challenges and the need for lots of adaptations. So I've just finished that one. So at the moment, what I'm going to do in April, I'm going to go to Uruguay and Argentina. I'm going to be presenting a virtual reality work that I did in the past with my own avatar, but I'm also going to use that time in both countries to research much more about about tango, which I've been doing for many, many years. But I want to get deeper into how tango is used, the history of tango, and see how that might fit more in my work. So at the moment it will be research, as I did when I went to Nunavut, to the Arctic. So I'm going to spend a couple of weeks there in Argentina and Uruguay.
Thank you so much. That sounds really interesting. Thank you for your contribution to the interview and all these fabulous experience you shared with me. If you want to add anything about your work or these projects, please let me know now.
Yeah, no, I just want to say that I'm very grateful to life that I got in touch with Michael and Border Crossings. I really admire the work that they're doing, and I follow them always, because every project brings a new understanding about who we are as human beings. So I hope that the Border Crossings continue for a very, very, very long time, impacting the lives of many people, but above all, to serve as a bridge of cultures, which is what Michael and his infrastructure is doing. And I wish them all the best, and hopefully in the future I can go back to them and collaborate with Border Crossing.